Well, hello there everyone. Dinoblade was a game that originated as a silly little animation of a Spinosaurus with a great sword doing a sort of anime sword combo, but after positive reaction, one thing led to another and a high effort shitpost got out of hand and turned into a passion project, and now we have a whole ass video game about being a Spinosaurus with multiple different great swords at our disposal as we slice and dice our way through the Cretaceous period, I suppose, now that it truly matters. But we've got bosses to rank, and there's some genuinely cool fights here, but also some pretty poor ones as well, and there's a lot of different stuff in between. Let's dive on in, shall we? Number 17, Tyrant Trio. Okay, so this one you could argue isn't even a boss fight, it's just a reskin of Kasei, the Tyrant's first phase, multiplied by 3. And now there's meteors dropping on you, and you have to complete this fight to advance in the game, so I'm counting it here because it's stupid, and this 100% should have been cut from the game. It adds nothing of value. It's not fun or interesting, it's not even really a challenge, it's just a slightly chaotic mess, but not so much in an enjoyable way, more just an irritating and tedious way, because all of them have a ton of HP, so whittling them down takes the better part of 4 minutes, but they do so little damage that you're in very little danger of actually dying. You just kinda spam for a while, and it takes a while for them to actually die. It's not fun, it's just annoying. Let's move on to the real bosses. Number 16, Speed. Yeah, this boss sure was on some speed when I fought him. Okay, before I talk about the fight, I just want to say it's really funny how boss names in this game are either things like Jim, Bob, Billy, or it's Grogoroth, the Elder Entity of Darkness, and shit like that. Anyways, this boss, yeah, it's obnoxious. First off, the boss more or less spawns in out of nowhere because I guess it's either a ninja or a vengeful spirit, not sure. And Speed, true to his name, is a quick foe, but he's also able to create shadow clones to join him in battle. The problem is though, this little jackass is hard to see and can constantly stun lock you if you're not careful. He's surprisingly not hard to parry, but the answer to parrying him is to just spam block instead of actually trying to learn his combos. But at the same time, if you've been investing in your skills at all, then you can just kind of ignore any of his mechanics and burst him down, which I somewhat recommend, because he's a bit of an obnoxious bastard otherwise, but he has so little HP. But at least his passive ability is pretty cool, being able to increase your attack speed by 10% when it's equipped, so hey, there's some value there, and I mean it's required to kill this guy, I'm pretty sure, so it's not like you could really skip him anyways. But you can burst him down quick enough, so it's not too terrible. Number 15, Tank. Or as I like to call him, Ankh the Tank. And Ankh the Tank is an annoying boss to battle, but admittedly, he's able to avoid the bad tier because his spirit power is one of the most useful in the game once you get it, because not only is, well, he a really good summon, as he's a very cheap and quick and able to stun enemies because his attack does decent damage and high hit stun, but his soul allows you to regain HP whenever you block or parry an attack. This alone turns the downside of blocking, where you still take a solid amount of damage, into a non-issue, and while some attacks are unblockable, they can still be parried, which is always useful, and that will regain some HP. This ability is the reason I was able to even stand a chance against the final boss fight, because that battle would be a near impossible war of attrition without this. Ultimately though, the fight isn't great. He only really takes damage when he's knocked over on his back, so you're otherwise just kind of chipping away at him very slowly until he finally gets stunned and you can actually do a little bit more damage against him. It's not the worst thing ever, but these bottom fights are just kind of mediocre and not very interesting, but thankfully after this, everything's at least decent. Number 14, Reaper in Shade. If you don't count the Tyrant Trio, which you probably shouldn't, then this is the only true gank boss of the game, and while not awful, this game doesn't exactly do gank bosses the best. Again, it's not awful mind you, but both of these guys are pretty small, and aside from their glowing weapons, they blend in with the arena pretty well, and they're just small enough that a lot of their attack animations get kind of obscured by your Spinosaurus wielding a greatsword. Otherwise, the two seem to mostly have the same moves, just with Reaper being more aggressive with melee, while Shade prefers to hang back and throw the occasional lightning bolts. Their summon is multiple lightning bolts, which can be helpful, and their passive is actually very good as it lowers the cost of their summoning. However, if you use the Resonant Edge, not only can you summon a dinosaur every 10 seconds, but it's randomized, all for the same low cost. So these two do a great job with the Resident Edge build, and that means you can have a really good summoner, chaos summoner build going on. Unfortunately though, by the time you get this option, there's only 4 bosses left at most, but hey, it's still fun if you want to wreak some havoc on the end game. Number 13, Mokusei the Titan. Our first major boss on the list, Mokusei is the largest boss of the bunch, but he's held back by some kind of iffy attacks and AI that is kind of easy to break. But it's not like it's necessarily awfully programmed, it's just an unfortunate, easy to pull off exploit. See, at mid-range he's able to swing that giant tree trunk at you like a blade, or even throw the thing at you if you're far enough away, but I've only ever seen him do that throwing attack one time, so it might not be super common. But up close, outside of the occasional tail swipe, all he's really got going for him is to try and stomp you with unblockable attacks, and it's either left foot, right foot, or both feet for a big shockwave that thankfully has an orange flash to signify the follow-up so you don't get caught off guard. It's not awful, and the scale of the boss is noteworthy, but you just won't get to see most of him, or most of the boss's moveset, and it's a bit of a shame. And it's also not helped by him having by far the most HP of anything outside of the endgame, the lack of a distinct second phase, and his AI sometimes just not being sure what to do, and going for a walk to try and get into range where he can use one of his attacks. As a major boss, you don't get access to his soul to summon in battle, but you will get a unique weapon from each major boss in the game. And as for Mokusei, you get the Greybone Greatsword, which has a purple flame effect that looks really cool, but its biggest appeal is the increased speed of your combos, allowing you to play far more relentlessly and sneak in more cheeky hits. The fight isn't bad, but it's definitely underwhelming compared to the other major boss fights of the game. Number 12, Horn. Out of all the in-game bosses, Horn is kind of the odd one out, as he's the only herbivore of the bunch. I suppose it is interesting that he uses a flail, but his overall damage is quite low despite his odd parry timing, which leads to a boss fight being very weak to the overpowered strategy of good old tank and spank, especially when your best offensive skills in the game have invincibility frames. It's not awful, but the fact is you can kind of just ignore most of what the boss does. Now, as for his summon ability, he loves to swing that flail around and hits enemies multiple times, and this can pair well with the roar that freezes enemies in place if you're a skill spammer. Then the passive ability that shortens your cooldowns is also really good to have. This can actually get really out of hand very quickly, and it even stacks with things like Resonant Blade, so if you're into the skill spamming moveset, this is your guy. Number 11, Haku. Haku is a boss that mechanically has all the makings of a good or even great early game boss fight, but he's held back by one fatal flaw, being his Earthquake and Blizzard after effects, making for downright absurd visual clutter in some situations. Now, Haku wields a massive fucking hammer that he's not afraid to bludgeon you with, and outside of that tail whip, every single one of his attacks is unblockable, meaning you either need to be able to dodge or parry. His melee moveset is pretty good for a fairly early game boss, but the rock spires can be a big issue at obscuring your vision, making it hard to see what attack's coming out next, and the same issue to a lesser extent applies to his Ice Storm move, making for honestly one of the toughest fights in the early game for how high his damage output is for so early. Though, as he is optional, you could always come back later. As for his summon, he doesn't really come with any passive buffs, but on the other hand, his summon ability is a large ice AoE that not only does good damage, but it also freezes enemies when it hits them, and it freezes them for a long time, so this can be a very strong summon to use. And it's also guaranteed to go off 100% of the time, unlike other things that have hit stun, so definitely worth considering. Number 10, Shield. I've always had a soft spot for the Stegosaurus, and he's one of my favorite dinosaurs, and this boss is pretty neat for an optional mini-boss. He initially seemed like he'd be a bit annoying to fight, like Tank, but instead of being armored all around, he's armored from the front, and he uses his whole body to attack you, so for this boss it's better to dodge and get good at positioning, but he's not just going to lounge around and let you attack him from behind, as he's actually pretty quick to reposition, and he is fairly aggressive. It's one of those fights that seems unassuming, but as the first optional boss you can come across in the game, he's got a neat little wrinkle with the armor gimmick that's not annoying to deal with, and his summoned attack is pretty good, doing decent damage for the early game, but where he really shines is his passive ability to increase your resonance recovery on every block and parry, which makes him the ideal in-game summon for a practiced skill spammer. And when done right, you can effectively spin half the boss fight being nigh invincible from all your SP recovery. Number 9. Stick. Much like his name, Stick is such an unassuming boss compared to most of the lineup, but he has something that has him stand out from the rest of the crowd, and that's that he's able to parry you and counter your attacks, unlike other bosses in this game. And that allows him to also make up for his lower HP and completely changes the fight dynamic. He can have some tricky combos, but outside of his heavily telegraphed big attacks, nothing he does is unblockable, and parrying them at the right time feels cool. But his ability to parry you back is nifty, and it keeps your over-aggression in check. His summon ability is kind of unremarkable by this point in the game. It's just another basic charge forward with decent damage and hit stun, but he significantly increases your parry windows as a passive ability, which makes him a much more new player friendly summon to have equipped. Albeit you don't get him until about halfway through the game, so maybe it's a little too late for training wheels, but hey, in-game bosses have some tricky combos, so we're going to take the positives here, as this will make the main boss of the third area much easier. Number 8, Kira the Exile. Our first proper boss of the game, Kira is the basic tutorial boss, able to get you used to everything with his combos and attacks he can perform out of a dodge, as well as the shakeup of him being able to boomerang throw his scythe for extra damage and force the player into sword clashes where they must mash the button to get out. And at half health, he gains some spin to win attacks as a bonus. He's also the only boss with a title that also has a boss soul you can equip normally, and its ability is a basic charge attack with high hit stun and good damage for the early game. But what really helps it stand out is his passive buff that increases your attack damage by 10%, which means he's able to carve out his own niche and stay useful throughout the entire game if you really want to, and that's cool. Number 7. Axe. Axe is technically the first mini-boss of the game, but unlike all the others, he's given the extra gravitas of an introductory cutscene because he's a bit more important than the other mini-bosses that mostly just exist for upgrades, as he's the first opponent to make use of unblockable attacks that must either be dodged or parried, and for those wondering, while not perfect, this game strikes an okay balance of the parry to dodge ratio, because parrying has a tighter window but increases the stagger gauge and restores SP. Dodging, on the other hand, is a much easier to perform, and it's far safer of an option, but with the bonus that, well, right after a parry, you won't always have a chance to retaliate, while after a dodge, you pretty much always do. It's not a perfect balance, and often parrying is the better option, but it's trying to strike a decent enough balance, so it's doing better than Lies of P, and it didn't corrupt and ruin my save file like that game did, so I enjoy it more. As for his summon, well, he's a T-Rex with a comedically large battle axe. What the heck do you think he's gonna do? Of course he's pretty powerful. But as a cool bonus, his passive ability is very helpful, especially in the early game, as he increases the speed at which your stamina regenerates, which is very awesome because there's a good chance you're gonna be panic rolling a lot or getting a little too gung-ho with the attack spam. Number 6. Dose, the Giant Claw. Out of all the major bosses, Dose is probably the boss with the most going for it in terms of
good atmosphere.
Like, you see this giant bird with super long claws and a scythe in its mouth coming out of the mist, like some sort of slasher movie villain or Grim Reaper, then all hell breaks loose as he starts slashing away at you. But unfortunately the horror dies kind of quickly because Phase 1 is a joke, with all his attacks being very easy to block, and him being open very often and very easy to stagger and knock over. He looks a bit spooky, but he's kind of a comedic joke. Then we reach Phase 2 where he unleashes the knowledge of the cosmos or some shit because he's now got psychic powers and is able to access the Speed Force, and for the life of me I cannot reliably parry some of these attacks. Not because they're badly designed, just because it's designed to overwhelm you visually, and that's kind of the intention. Honestly, for this boss it's probably worth using Ankh the Tank to get health back when blocking, or use Stick because of the increased parry window, because good lord you're going to need one of those two. The fight is chaotic, it's fun, it's challenging, It's a little bit crazy, and I somehow eked out a win with 1 health point left and no heals remaining, cutting the fight as close as possible. Probably could have made things easier if I used my stunning roar, but the roar is mapped to the same button as your charge attack, and it starts charging basically immediately, so you really can't hold it for even a millisecond too long, and all of a sudden the roar is cancelled. The weapon you get for winning is the Naharu Flameborn, which boosts the damage of heavy attack combos, but I'm going to be honest, it's kind of a dud in my eyes because I never found much use for heavy attack combos, because most of the time they're too slow to be useful outside of the blade that gets earthquake follow-ups for its heavy attacks. But that's a separate weapon entirely, so you can't exactly make use of the Flameborn's buff here. If you can make this thing work, more power to ya. For me, it's kind of a waste of time, but hey, the boss fight's pretty cool and it does mark as a good gatekeeper to the late game. Number 5, Katsuro. Katsuro is one of those bosses that would probably make for a surprising ambush if there wasn't a save point right before him, but he's still putting in a strong effort in this fight with his multiple kicks and flips making for a surprisingly acrobatic halberd wielder, and that allows his fight to stand out from most of the others, while he's also large enough to actually be pretty visible and able to read what he's doing despite how dark the arena tends to be, with only the storm really giving you ample lighting. Plus, otherwise, he's still a really cool boss fight with his own unique move set. He's got his own built-in double jump, which is kind of funny, and he's able to throw his halberd at you, making for quite the dangerous but fun challenge at any range. And his summon is another charge attack variant, but unlike the others, he spawns in the air and crashes into enemies like a missile, so he can hit them regardless of their position and distance, and he doesn't care if they're in the sky or not, which is funny. And his passive, increasing the invincibility frames of your dodge, is a nice little fallback. Plus, if you want to get the Resonant Edge, then it's going to be right up there on the cliff that's overlooking this boss fight. And so, for those looking for the summon spam build, there you go. Number 4, Makuri, the Ice King. Our big bad final boss fight. Makuri is an intense battle with his massive greatsword, his mastery of ice, and his ability to use spirit summons, just like you, except he's got access to things like a Plesiosaurus, a pterodactyl, and a fire-breathing dragon, just to be different. These are all the foes he's slain. Those swords in his back are others that have challenged him and failed. He's a tough opponent to be sure, and will put you to the test. But he can be a very fun boss fight to go all out against, and his attacks are so powerful that, well, none of them can be blocked outside of a single combo where he opens up with a stomp. However, they can be parried. But while this fight is awesome, it definitely has some issues, such as the ice left behind by his Ice Slash being an active hitbox that lingers for entirely too long and hits you multiple times. Not for a lot of damage, but it does stun you. And both of his summons and ice attacks are unblockable without the orange flash that indicates they're unblockable, like every other attack in the game that is. Still, once you know these attacks, you can get around them. It's just kind of annoying to deal with, and you can't parry them either, to my knowledge. It's tough, but it's satisfying to fight, and his powerful ice attacks, heavy slashes, and the blizzard growing ever stronger, and despite all of that, and all the craziness going on, he still leaves a fair number of openings for the player, and doesn't just have infinite hyper armor. He's playing a fair game, he's just got a cracked out deck. But the Ice King is a satisfying final battle to take on and overcome. But then his health bar runs out, and he reveals he's got a second one where he becomes Makuri the Flame Reborn, as we've now gone from regular winter to nuclear winter. His speed has increased, and now he follows up his attacks with fire. He's become more agile, and even though his main melee combos are mostly unchanged, his magic, for lack of a better term, and his souls have changed, as he'll now unleash the fire-breathing dragon mentioned earlier, some electric bird monster that you need to dodge like your life depends on it because it can take you from full health to death in a single combo, and he can leave the arena only to come back in from the sky for a powerful slam. The music here also goes all in on the heavy metal because the game knows it's inherently cool and embraces that fact. But I'm still on the fence as to whether or not I'd call this boss worthy of the amazing tier for a couple reasons. One, while Phase 1 works great, it's still a long battle on its own, taking the better part of 4 minutes to beat, which is longer than most other bosses in the game. and then you have to deal with the Flame Reborn right after. Second, there's so much shit going on in the Flame Reborn fight that it can be straight up hard to see what's going on at times, like those complaints with Consort Radahn before he got nerfed. Granted, Mach Yuri is still leaving openings and giving you plenty of chances to retaliate. It is hard, but it's fair. However, his dragon is not so nice because, for the life of me, I cannot figure that son of a bitch out. Other than, when you see the fire breath, it's time to move out the way, and when the Flame Reborn drops below half health, the dragon will go for an electric slam combo that lasts entirely too long, and I have not found a good way to retaliate against it, so I just resort to roll spamming, and it gets me out of 99% of his attacks. And keep in mind, this isn't a separate boss fight either. This is Phase 2. You have to do this entire battle in one go with no healing restocks in between, and you're staring down a boss fight that lasted me the better part of 9 minutes to beat. Granted, I saw a video of Ongbal taking both phases down in about 2 minutes, so maybe I'm seriously underleveled or something, but I killed basically everything on the way here, and I even did a bit of grinding against random enemies for fun, so I don't know. Either way, this boss beat some patience into me in a way that few other bosses have. Ankh the Tank was a must for me because being able to recover health when I parried him gave me that survivability I needed to stand a chance, and even then, I was still out of healing by the end of the fight and used up my Tears of Denial safety net. This boss fight is hard. It's awesome, but man, is it freaking hard. But it's still an awesome boss fight, and it ends with him entering his third phase, acting as a pinch mode where it answers the question, what killed the dinosaurs? Was it the Ice Age? Was it the meteorite? Well, the answer to both is still Mach Yuri, because he calls down a frickin' meteor on you. Pro tip, if you're on controller, use all the triggers and shoulder buttons and you can mash way faster. Don't screw this part up though, because you don't want to die. It's a challenging final battle, but it's very rewarding to square off with this ancient demon trapped in the world's angriest dinosaur, but I think it could use a little more polish, at least on clearly indicating what attacks are unblockable. Still, it's a kick-ass final battle to cap off a game that's very fun and knows it's cool as hell. Number 3. Kase the Tyrant. From our final battle to the boss that acts as the end of Act 1, Kase is the largest foe we faced up to this point in the game, and it honestly isn't that much smaller than the big bad fight with Mach Yuri. This guy is going to kick your ass so much that he's the first boss in the game that doesn't make you respawn at a save point, and instead you can start the fight over immediately from his battle. And like the rest of the top boss fights, he's a 2-phase battle, with phase 1 having him wield an Ankylosaurus like a club and try to bludgeon you over the head with it. This part can seem oppressive, but after an attempt or two you'll start to see a bunch of openings, and even though he chains unblockables into his regular attacks, they're very easy to dodge or parry, so while they're dangerous, it does work well for what's only the third boss in the entire game. But after taking enough damage, he decides screw the Ankylosaurus and pulls out his own weapon. One could hardly call it a sword, more like a slab of raw iron. At this point, he's got more unblockables and extended combos, though thankfully everything is still quite readable, and he staggers easier than you'd expect. So you're not forced to constantly play defensive, just remember to use your heavy attacks from time to time and use your skills for some damage. Just don't think that you can camp him out, because if you stay too far away, he will throw his sword at you, then quickly leap after it with a follow-up slam that has a bit of a shockwave. You can parry it, but let's be honest, if you're trying to play lame and camp him out, you're not going to be that good at parrying. It's going to be a tough boss fight to overcome, but it feels very rewarding to successfully execute, and you feel like you earn the victory when you do kick his ass. And the weapon for beating this boss is the Asteron Meteor End, which is honestly one of the best weapons in the game, dealing more damage than your starting blade and giving earthquake follow-ups to your heavy attacks, so there's no reason to not pick it over the starting blade. And quite frankly, unless you're going for the extra attack speed of Greybone or the summoning spam of Resonant Edge, this should probably be your main weapon until the final level of the game, no questions asked. It is that strong. Number 2, Red Ash. Red Ash initially seems unassuming as a modest-sized dinosaur, but then you approach him, If there's any boss in the game that might fit the moniker of Super Boss, it's Red Ash. He's the last optional boss in the game, and the last one that gives you a soul you can obtain for winning, in addition to being the only optional boss with a distinct second phase, and the only reason he's not definitively a Super Boss is his HP isn't unreasonably high. But just because this boss fight doesn't last very long doesn't mean he's easy. It's one of the shorter battles in the game, but that just means he kills you super quickly. The fight is definitely going to be tough with all the elemental unstable dinosaur attacks he's unleashing of both fire and ice on you, on top of being able to quickly dash around like lightning through the arena, and he'll make use of ice smoke screens to perform follow-up attacks. His only real weakness is his fire breath does leave him fairly open, but it's still not a free win when he uses that, as he's one of the few bosses that chains unblockables in between his long combos, which means you need to be on point when dealing with his assaults, or getting the hell out of the way and dodging like your life depends on it. He's an awesome boss fight, in my opinion. And he acts as the last optional challenge before the endgame. Now as for his summon, it's unfortunately a bit underwhelming. He deals higher damage at the cost of a longer cooldown, which means he's looking at about 7,500 damage from summoning him, which is great, but the cooldown time of summoning him is 60 seconds compared to the average being 30 seconds. Of course, Resonant Edge will offset this and bring it down to 10 seconds, but as far as I can tell, the damage buff doesn't apply to other summons, just Red Ash. Not that it really matters, however, because you may have noticed that outside of Kira the Exiled, we're not able to equip the souls of major bosses and summon them in battle on command. However, Resonant Edge gets around this with a very high chance to summon out the likes of Kase, Mokusei, and Dosei, each able to easily hit for over 10,000 damage, and while yes, it's a random chance, the odds of them showing up are decently high and you can keep rolling the gacha quickly, easily, and pretty cheaply. And it's not like the other summons are bad either. It's an awesome boss fight, but unfortunately his summon is kind of a dud. Doesn't really affect the fight for me though, it's just he's not getting any bonus points from it. Number 1, Akai. Also known as Akatsuki the Blood Moon. And could it really have been anyone else? Akai is the one that saved us at the beginning of the game and gave us our power. However, it was revealed his main goal was simply to amass power until he could finally claim your soul and be strong enough to get his revenge against Makyuri. His design is edgy and awesome in all the right ways, and his abilities closely match your own, with their own versions of things like Judgment Cut and the Enraged Slash, on top of him having sword beams. And while he can't summon the souls of other dinosaurs, he is able to roll around at the speed of sound, and he's much faster than most other heavy hitters in the game. Even Makyuri has a more slow and deliberate attacks than this guy does, when he's going all out against you for sure. But he doesn't have very many unblockable attacks, so if you're worried, then the likes of Ankh the Tank can make surviving much easier, and he's a bit more generous with his attacks than, say, Makyuri, or honestly, maybe even Dosei. Also, your roar is buffed for this boss fight, but I didn't use it because I'm an idiot. That's all I have to say on that. It's a tough fight, and he is quick, but there are consistent openings in this boss battle, and you're going to learn them very quickly. And you can even sneak in hits in the middle of his combos if you know when to press the attack. It's got all the makings of just an awesome boss fight, and yeah, it's a ton of fun, it's got great build-up, it looks awesome, it's goofy as hell, and I mean, it's metal as hell, because look at this! But he's not done, because he then reveals he has a second health bar where his true form is unveiled as an ancient demon dual-wielding his sword and another Japanese blade, and he's more than happy to slice you to ribbons in the final arena from Fate's Stay Night Unlimited Blade Works. And initially this phase seems really overwhelming, but it's actually much easier as he has fewer combos available and instead just likes to kind of overwhelm you with these multi-slicing combos, but very few of his attacks are unblockable, and unique to this boss is if you successfully parry one of his melee attacks mid-combo, he's going to stop and stumble backwards for a second, like a mini stagger, because while he is large, we're a massive fucking Spinosaurus. It's a challenging fight, and it's built up throughout a lot of the game. I figured we'd fight Akai, but when he went demon mode, I was honestly expecting this was going to be the final boss fight, especially from the Doom the Dark Ages music backing us up, the intense arena, and all the build up, the challenge, the presence of the final boss feeling at least. And overall, he's just so freaking fun to battle against. He's genuinely an awesome boss fight, and while there is obviously some jank from this being a game made by a small dev studio, that doesn't really get in the way of it for me. Now, as for winning this fight, you get access to Akai's own weapon, Akai's Chainbound, which damage-wise is comparable to the other greatswords, maybe a bit better, but its special ability is giving you access to sword beams for plenty of ranged attacks on top of just having fucking sword beams, and that's cool. And it buffs your charged attacks as well. All that's left after this fight is the final boss fight, but it's still a cool ass weapon to use against said final boss, and also in boss rush, and it makes parrying the meteor all the more dramatic. It's a great reward to cap off my favorite battle in the game. And that's about all for this video. Dinoblade is the result of a high-effort shitpost turning into a high-effort passion project made by a microscopic team of developers in a concept that should have been a 1 hour long itch.io meme game at most. But what we got instead was a surprisingly very fun and decently challenging romp to go through, and while it's not some perfect 10 out of 10 masterpiece, it's not trying to be the greatest thing ever made. It's looking at what's the coolest things out there: dinosaurs, great swords, fire. Combine them all and make this awesome game that's about 5 hours. It knows exactly what it wants to be, and is so goofy, but so earnest in its execution that it wraps around to being genuinely awesome. Obviously, I recommend this game. It's $20 fucking and doesn't even add too much of your time, but if you're on the fence, there's a demo for the game. So really, if you watched all the way through, give it a shot already. Anyways, that's all I've got for this video. If you'd like to see more content of varying quality, consider liking, subscribing, and hyping the video, and I'll see you all next time. Until then, take care.